They said the twins would never walk, never speak, never laugh. But one afternoon, their father heard a sound he hadn't heard in 3 years. A giggle echoing down a hallway that was supposed to be silent. That day was supposed to be ordinary. Ethan Cole had built his world around order. The mansion on the hill gleamed like a glass trophy. Spotless floors, locked rooms, and the kind of silence money buys. Every morning, he passed by the nursery without looking in. It was easier that way. The twins, Aiden and Noah, were his heartbreak wrapped in small, unmoving bodies. 3 years ago, the delivery room had taken everything from him. His wife, Lily, gone in an instant, and his sons left with a cruel diagnosis: total paralysis. Since then, Ethan had filled his life with numbers, meetings, and schedules. Anything but memories. Until Maya Rivers arrived. She wasn't what he expected from the agency. A soft-spoken woman with kind eyes and an accent that carried a melody of someplace warmer. She moved through the mansion with quiet confidence, wearing her kindness like armor. Her job was simple: to keep the house tidy and assist the children's medical aides. Ethan barely noticed her at first. He didn't believe in hope anymore. But 6 weeks later, something began to change. One rainy evening, Ethan came home early. The mansion was dim, except for a faint golden glow spilling from the nursery. As he walked closer, a voice floated through the half-open door, low, rhythmic, and gentle. Maya was singing. Not lullabies from any charted playlist, but something older, something that sounded like it belonged to firelight and open skies. Ethan stopped when he saw the impossible. Aiden's eyes, his son's eyes, were following her hand as she waved a small wooden rattle. Noah's fingers twitched, reaching toward the sound. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. He stood frozen, his breath sharp in his chest. "What are you doing?" he demanded, stepping into the room. Maya turned, startled but calm. "Good evening, Mr. Cole. I was—" "Answer me." His voice rose. "They can't move. They don't respond. Every doctor, every specialist has confirmed that." Maya's hand stayed steady. "Maybe, sir," she said softly. "Or maybe they just needed someone to listen." Her calm infuriated him. "You're not a therapist. You're here to clean, not to fill their heads with false hope." A small sound interrupted him. A soft, deliberate hum came from Aiden's bed. Then another from Noah, like 2 matching notes of a song only they understood. Ethan froze. "They made a sound," he whispered. "Yes," Maya said, a small smile forming. "They've been trying to for days." Ethan shook his head, retreating a step. "That's not possible." "Then maybe," she replied gently, "it's time to redefine possible." Later that night, Ethan found himself watching the security footage from the nursery. Maya sat on the floor between the cribs, telling stories, not from books, but her own imagination. She spoke to them like equals, not patients. "You are not broken," she whispered on the recording. "You are waiting. And I'm not leaving until the world sees what I see." Her voice cracked slightly, and Ethan felt something inside him shift, a flicker of warmth he thought was gone forever. The next morning, he called his head physician, Dr. Grant, demanding an urgent review. The man arrived, ran his usual tests, and left, shaking his head. "I see no change, Ethan. Don't let the caregiver fill you with false hope." But Ethan had seen it. He'd heard it. That evening he returned to the nursery, finding Maya painting faint streaks of blue and green on the walls. "What are you doing now?" he asked. "Changing the way they see their world," she said. "White walls feel like a cage." He wanted to argue, but didn't. For the first time, he noticed the room wasn't sterile anymore. It felt alive. There were soft blankets, children's books, even sunlight creeping through curtains that had been closed for years. Aiden blinked toward the light. Noah laughed, an honest, breathy sound that shook Ethan to his core. And for the first time since Lily's death, Ethan felt the edges of something unfamiliar but powerful. Hope. That night, when Maya thought he'd gone to bed, Ethan stood outside the nursery, listening. "Tomorrow," Maya whispered to the twins, "we'll show your daddy what love can do." Ethan leaned his forehead against the cold wall and exhaled a trembling breath. He didn't know if he was angry, afraid, or grateful, but he knew one thing. Whatever Maya Rivers was doing in that room, it was working. By the end of that week, the mansion wasn't silent anymore. The hum of music, the soft rhythm of laughter, the shuffle of movement, life had begun to leak into every corner, and Ethan Cole didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. It had started with small things. Aiden's fingers curling around Maya's necklace, Noah's eyes tracking a ball of yarn as she rolled it across the floor, little details that no camera or chart could explain. But with every new sound, every flicker of motion, Ethan's doubt grew louder. What if she was manipulating them somehow? What if he was being made a fool of? That question gnawed at him until one morning he walked into the nursery unannounced. Maya sat cross-legged on the carpet, the twins on soft mats beside her. The air smelled faintly of lavender and acrylic paint. She was tapping a rhythm on a small wooden drum. "Left, then right," she murmured, guiding Noah's tiny hands. "That's it. Feel it." The boy's hand twitched, once, then again, and landed exactly where she tapped. Ethan froze in the doorway. "What is this?" Maya looked up, her eyes calm. "Pattern learning," she said simply. "It helps them reconnect sound and movement." "That's not medical therapy," Ethan said sharply. "No," she replied. "It's human therapy." He wanted to argue, but before he could, Aiden let out a sharp, clear sound. "Ma." It wasn't quite a word, but close enough to stop Ethan's heart. He stumbled forward. Did you hear that?" Maya didn't celebrate. She just smiled, her tone steady and patient. "He's been trying all morning." Ethan knelt beside the bed, his voice barely a whisper. "Say it again, buddy. Come on." Aiden looked at him, blinked slowly, and made a soft hum that faded into a giggle. Ethan laughed too, but the sound broke halfway, caught between joy and disbelief. Maya placed a gentle hand on his arm. "They were never gone, Mr. Cole. You were just too far away to hear them." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, the monitors glowing with grainy footage of Maya's sessions. She wasn't performing miracles. She was listening, noticing, adapting. Every sound, every flinch, every flicker of emotion became part of a quiet code she seemed to understand intuitively. He rewound one clip again and again. Maya whispering something he couldn't make out. Aiden blinking twice in perfect response. Was she teaching them, or unlocking something the doctors missed? The next morning, he called in a favor from an old friend, Dr. Eleanor Shaw, a child neurologist he trusted more than anyone. By the end of the week, she arrived with her suitcase of instruments and a skeptical smile. "Ethan, I've seen a lot of hopeful parents," she said. "Don't make me the bad guy when this turns out to be wishful thinking." "Just observe," he pleaded. "That's all I ask." She agreed. For 2 hours, Dr. Shaw watched from behind the glass while Maya worked. No machines, no charts, just rhythm, touch, and connection. Then, halfway through a session, something extraordinary happened. Maya lifted her hands and said softly, "Aiden, if you can hear me, raise your right hand." The boy hesitated. Then, slowly, deliberately, his right hand lifted off the mat. Dr. Shaw's pen slipped from her fingers. "Again," Maya whispered. "Right hand for yes, left for no. Do you want your dad to see?" Right hand, again. Ethan pressed his palm to the glass, tears burning behind his eyes. Dr. Shaw's voice was hushed. "Ethan, that's controlled motor response. That shouldn't be possible. But it was. Later, when the twins were asleep, Dr. Shaw met Maya in the kitchen. "I've been in this field 30 years, she said quietly. "I've never seen recovery like this. Where did you train?" Maya hesitated before answering. "Nowhere special. I just pay attention." "Attention doesn't heal nerves, Doctor," Shaw replied. "Maybe not," Maya said. "But love does something science still can't measure." That night, Ethan sat alone in his office. On his desk lay a file of the twins' medical history. Years of diagnoses, failed treatments, sterile notes. He compared them to what he'd seen today. They didn't match. None of it did. He turned the last page and froze. A signature he hadn't noticed before. Dr. Grant. The same doctor who had convinced him the boys would never recover. Below it, a handwritten note. "Recommend no further neurological reevaluation to avoid unnecessary stress." A chill crawled up Ethan's spine. No further reevaluation. For 3 years, no one had checked again. He leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. What if they weren't paralyzed? What if they had never been? He stared at the dark window, his reflection looking back at him, and whispered, "Maya, what did you just uncover?" The next morning felt different. Even the sunlight that poured through the tall windows seemed unsure whether it belonged there. Ethan Cole sat at the breakfast table, untouched coffee cooling beside a stack of medical records. Across from him, Maya quietly fed the twins oatmeal, humming under her breath. The boys watched her with rapt attention, their faces animated in ways doctors had once said were impossible. He couldn't take his eyes off them. How had she done this? Finally, he said, "Maya, I looked through their files last night." She kept her tone gentle. "And there are notes missing, tests that were never done. One doctor said they shouldn't be reevaluated. Why would anyone say that?" Maya's spoon paused in midair. "Maybe because someone didn't want you to see the truth." Ethan blinked. "What truth?" Maya set the spoon down and folded her hands as if bracing herself. "Mr. Cole, I think your sons were never truly paralyzed." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. Ethan's throat tightened. "That's ridiculous. The MRIs, the specialists, every single one of them said—" "I know," Maya interrupted softly, "but I've seen the signs. The twitching, the eye movement, the way their fingers respond to touch. These aren't reflexes, sir. They're controlled." He wanted to argue, to shut her down, to say this was impossible. But deep down, he knew she was right. "What are you saying?" he finally asked. "I'm saying someone kept your boys trapped in that state, not by nature, but by neglect. Or something worse." Her words hung heavy in the air. That night, after the house went quiet, Ethan went digging. He searched through years of invoices, insurance claims, and treatment reports. Line after line, number after number. And then something caught his eye. Monthly payments to a research trust he didn't remember approving. Every payment was signed by Dr. Grant, the same man who had diagnosed his sons. He dug deeper, pulling up archived emails. One message stood out, dated 2 years ago. "Dr. Grant, as discussed, continued treatment under sedation maintains stability and supports long-term funding. No need for parental reevaluation at this time. L. Vance, Director, Neurocare Institute." Ethan's stomach dropped. Sedation, funding. He rushed upstairs to the nursery. Maya was sitting by the window, sketchbook on her lap. She looked up when she saw his face. "What did you find?" she asked quietly. He handed her the printout. They kept them drugged. For funding. For God knows what. Maya scanned the page, her expression unreadable. "Then we need proof. Real proof. Something no one can deny." The next day, Maya approached the twins' medicine cabinet. Tiny bottles lined the shelves, each labeled with cold precision. Neurocalm, Synprox, Restadone. She pulled one down, reading the dosage. Her jaw tightened. "These doses are too high," she murmured. "Even for adults." Ethan leaned over her shoulder. "You think that's what's keeping them this way?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." She turned, meeting his gaze with quiet certainty. "We'll do this carefully. No sudden changes. I'll start reducing the doses, little by little. If I'm wrong, you can fire me tomorrow. But if I'm right," Ethan finished for her, his voice low. "If you're right, they'll wake up." Over the next 6 weeks, the house transformed again. This time with tension. Every day, Maya tracked the twins' reactions in a small leather notebook. Every night, Ethan double-checked her notes, recording video logs in secret. There were moments that made his heart stop. A flinch, a sudden stillness, a skipped breath. But then came progress. Tiny, undeniable steps. Aiden began to smile when Maya entered the room. Noah kicked his feet when she sang. By week 4, they could hold soft toys in their hands. By week 5, Aiden said something that made Ethan drop the camera. Day. It was small, uncertain, fragile, but real. "Say it again," Ethan whispered, kneeling. The boy's lips moved. Tears blurred Ethan's vision. He laughed, a sound half joy, half disbelief. Maya stood behind him, her eyes wet but steady. "I told you," she said softly. They were waiting to be believed. But not everyone was happy about it. On week 6, Dr. Grant called unexpectedly. "Ethan," he said, his tone clipped, "I heard you've made changes to the boys' regimen. That's not advisable." "What's not advisable," Ethan snapped, "is keeping my children drugged for 3 years." A long silence. Then, coolly, the doctor said, "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," Ethan replied, "and soon everyone else will too." He hung up before the man could answer. Maya stepped into the office doorway, having overheard the call. "He's scared," she said. "Good," Ethan replied, standing tall for the first time in years. "He should be." That night, the twins slept peacefully for the first time without medication. Their breathing was steady, their faces calm. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching them. Maya joined him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tomorrow," she said, "the truth begins." He nodded. He didn't know what they were stepping into. Lawsuits. Threats, danger, but for the first time in years, he knew what he was fighting for. His family, and the woman who had given them back. The call came at dawn. A deep voice on the other end said only, "Mr. Cole, stop whatever you're doing. You're digging where you shouldn't." Then the line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone, pulse racing. The mansion, once a sanctuary, suddenly felt like a trap. He rushed to the nursery. Maya was already awake, folding blankets with calm precision. But one look at him, and she knew something had shifted. "They called you, didn't they?" she said quietly. He nodded. "They're watching us." She set the blanket down and met his eyes. "Then let's give them something to watch." That morning, Maya laid her notebook on the kitchen table. Every page was filled with notes, dates, photos, and videos, documenting every milestone since she'd arrived. "This isn't just about your boys anymore," she said. "It's bigger. Every hospital I've worked for, every family I've helped, there were always the same doctors, the same signatures, the same drug brands." Ethan frowned. "You're saying this is organized?" "Systemic," she corrected. "They're paid to keep children labeled as unfixable. It keeps the funding flowing." Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't guessing. She knew. Ethan's hands trembled as he flipped through her pages. "And you've been collecting this?" "For years," she said simply, "waiting for someone with the power to do something about it." He looked at her, realizing for the first time that she wasn't just a caregiver. She was a witness, maybe even a whistleblower. By noon, Ethan had made his choice. He called his legal team, but not the corporate attorneys who handled his empire. He called a woman named District Attorney Leela Santos, a longtime friend of his late wife. Within hours, Santos arrived at the mansion, flanked by 2 investigators. She was sharp, composed, and all business. "Maya Rivers," she said, shaking her hand. "I've read some of your notes. You understand what you're alleging, right? Medical fraud on a federal scale. We'll need evidence, something irrefutable." Maya nodded, sliding a small flash drive across the table. "It's all there. Voice recordings, prescription histories, bank transfers. And one more thing. Dr. Grant's confession." Santos raised an eyebrow. "You got him on record?" Maya's tone was steady. "He talks too much when he thinks no one's listening." They set up a quiet sting the following afternoon. Dr. Grant had agreed to come for what he believed was a routine checkup with the twins. But when he arrived, things were anything but routine. Ethan greeted him at the door, his expression cold. "Doctor," he said evenly, "we need to talk." Grant smiled thinly, setting down his briefcase. "Of course, Ethan. How are our little patients today?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Our children are fine," the doctor blinked. "Excuse me?" Maya stepped forward from the shadows of the hallway. "He said children, doctor, not patients. Maybe you should try using that word sometime." Grant turned pale. "You again. I warned you to stay in your lane." "I did," she said softly. "It just turns out my lane leads straight to justice." The next few minutes unfolded like a movie. Ethan pressed a button on his phone and the tablet on the table lit up, playing a recording of Grant's voice. "The boys are stable," the recording echoed. "No need for more tests. As long as the trust money keeps moving, we're fine." "The father doesn't question anything." Grant's face drained of color. "Where did you—" "From your own words," Maya said. "And your emails, your invoices, your drug orders. You built an empire on broken families." Grant's composure cracked. "You don't know who you're dealing with. There are people above me, powerful people." "Then they can join you in court," Santos said, stepping into the room, badge in hand. Grant froze. "You set me up." Ethan's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "No, doctor. You set yourself up the moment you chose profit over my sons." 2 federal agents moved in, reading Grant his rights as he stammered and protested. Maya didn't flinch. When the door finally closed behind the agents, silence filled the house again. But this time, it was peaceful. Ethan sank into a chair, hands shaking. "I can't believe it's over." Maya shook her head gently. "It's not over, Mr. Cole. That was just the first domino." She opened her laptop and pulled up a document labeled Project Dawnlight. Families affected. Ethan stared. "How many?" "Dozens," she said. "Maybe hundreds. Children misdiagnosed. Parents manipulated. Some of them didn't survive." He leaned forward, voice low. "Then we're not stopping." Maya met his gaze, her eyes fierce but kind. "Then we do it right. We don't just take them down. We change the system that let them exist." Later that night, Ethan walked into the nursery. The boys were asleep, their breathing steady, their faces peaceful. He sat between their beds, the sound of the rain outside like a quiet applause. Maya appeared at the doorway, holding 2 cups of tea. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Not tonight. Not after this." She handed him a cup and sat beside him. For a long time, they said nothing. They didn't need to. The world outside had just shifted, and somewhere deep down they both knew this was only the beginning. 6 months later, the mansion didn't feel like a mansion anymore. It felt like a home. The marble floors that once echoed with silence now trembled beneath little feet. Laughter danced through the halls. The twins, Aiden and Noah, were no longer shadows in hospital beds. They were explorers, chatterboxes, mischief makers. Ethan Cole often found himself standing in doorways just watching them, marveling at every giggle, every step, every question that spilled from their curious mouths. Sometimes when they called him Dad, it still didn't feel real. But then he'd catch Maya's eye from across the room, and she'd smile that calm, knowing smile that had changed everything. And reality would settle in. They had made it. The headlines came first. Major medical fraud network exposed. Billionaire family's case sparks federal reform. Or whistleblower nanny helps rewrite pediatric laws. Dr. Grant and his associates had all been charged. Dozens of others were under investigation. Hospitals were forced to re-examine hundreds of false diagnoses. But what mattered most to Ethan wasn't the punishment. It was the prevention. That's why he created the Dawnlight Foundation. Its mission was simple: protect children from medical exploitation and give families a voice when no one else would listen, and at its head stood the person who had made it all possible. Maya Rivers. She had resisted the idea at first. "I'm not a director," she said when Ethan offered her the role. "I'm just someone who saw what others ignored." Ethan smiled. "That's exactly why you should lead it." So she did. And from the very beginning, she led with heart. Her voice became the one parents trusted. Her compassion turned into national change. Laws were rewritten, new safety protocols introduced, and within a year, the Dawnlight Protocol became a mandatory medical standard across the country. Ethan often joked that she'd done more for reform in 12 months than he had in 12 years of business. She'd just laugh and say, "That's because you were fixing numbers. I was fixing people." One warm afternoon, Ethan stood on the foundation's rooftop garden, watching as reporters packed up their cameras after another successful press conference. Maya joined him, her hair catching the sunlight, the city skyline reflected in her eyes. "Do you ever stop to think how far we've come?" he asked. She shrugged with a smile. "Sometimes. But then I remember how far there's still to go." He chuckled softly. "You sound like Lily." Maya glanced at him, touched. "She must have been extraordinary." "She was," he said, voice softening. "And she'd be proud of what you've done." Maya looked away, blinking back emotion. "I didn't do it alone, Ethan." "No," he said. "You just gave us a reason to believe again." That evening, back at home, the twins were waiting in the living room, a mess of crayons and paper spread across the rug. "Dad, look," Noah said, holding up a drawing. 4 stick figures stood under a bright yellow sun. Ethan crouched down, smiling. "Who's this?" Noah pointed. "That's you. That's me and Aiden, and that's Maya," Aiden interrupted proudly. "She's part of the family now." Maya laughed softly, kneeling beside them. "Is that so?" Aiden nodded, serious. "You're our heart helper." The words hit Ethan like a quiet explosion. He looked at Maya, and for a moment, the noise of the world disappeared. Later that night, when the boys were asleep, Ethan found her in the kitchen preparing the twins' favorite bedtime drink, warm vanilla milk with honey. He leaned against the counter. "You know," he said, "I still don't understand how you stayed so calm through all of it." She smiled faintly. "When you've seen enough darkness, you learn to keep your own light steady." He nodded, then took a deep breath. "Maya, there's something I haven't told you." She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds serious." He slid an envelope across the counter. Inside were legal papers, signed, stamped, and sealed. She opened them slowly, then froze. "Ethan, what is this?" "It's the adoption approval," he said softly. "For you." Her eyes widened. "You've been their mother in every way that matters," he continued. "I just made it official, if you want it." For a long moment, Maya couldn't speak. Her hands trembled as tears slipped down her cheeks. Then she whispered, "I want it." Ethan smiled. "Then welcome home, Maya Cole." From the hallway came a soft rustle. The twins were peeking through the doorway, grinning from ear to ear. "We heard everything," Noah announced. "Does that mean we get 2 parents now?" Maya laughed through her tears. It means you've had them all along. The boys ran into her arms, and Ethan wrapped his family in a hug that felt like sunlight. Warm, complete, and finally free. 3 years later, the Dawnlight Foundation had helped over 300 families reclaim their children's futures. Maya had become an international voice for ethical medicine, speaking before governments, universities, and hospitals around the world. And Aiden and Noah, now 8 years old, were thriving, curious, bright, and full of mischief. Every morning before school, they'd stop by the garden and shout, "Let the light in," a phrase Maya had taught them on her very first day in the house. And each time, Ethan would smile, realizing that those words had become the story of their lives. Because when love meets courage, light always finds its way back.